All right. So we're going to go on and start going over the review sheet today. So the first thing we're going to look at is problems 1 through 6. Problems 1 through 6. On problems 1 through 6, we need to be able to identify whether the equation that they give us is going to be direct, inverse, or neither. Direct, inverse, or neither. Now, the general forms for these here, direct variation comes in the form of y equals a times x. This is the main form that we have. Now, it also could be x equals a times y, because either one of these works just fine. Let's get our review sheet out. Now, we also have it where we can get both variables on the same side, so we could say y over x is equal to a, or really x over y equals a. All of these are the same form of direct variation. Inverse variation, y is equal to a divided by x. Or really, we can say x is equal to a divided by y. Or if we get them on the same side, we get x times y is equal to a. So if we get it in one of these forms, it's going to be inverse, where a is just a number and our x and y are our variables. Now for direct variation, if the variables are on opposite sides, they're both either in the numerator and denominator. They're both above, on top of the fractions, or on bottom. We don't normally see them on bottom, but mainly they're both going to be on top. If they're on the same side of the equation, they're going to be divided by each other. Inverse variation, if the variables are on opposite sides of the equal sign, one's going to be on top, one's going to be on bottom. One's going to be on top of the fraction in the numerator, the other's going to be in the denominator. And if they're on the same side, they're going to be multiplied together. So if we look through this here, number 1, 8y equals x would be direct. Be direct variation because we have the variables on opposite sides. They're both in the numerator. It is direct. Because we could also have rewritten this. We didn't have to. Y is equal to 1/8 x divided by x, 8. Same form. Let's look at number 2. X times y equals 1/5 would be inverse. Because it matches up to our inverse form. RSE. 6x plus 4y equals 7 would be if the variables are being added together, it's going to be neither every single time. If we get x plus y, it's not going to work. Really, the only other case that we have neither for is, well, we need two variables. We cannot have a single variable. Because if it's just x equals 7, y equals 2, if we don't have x and y, it cannot be direct or inverse. Have to have two variables for direct or inverse variation. Number 4, 6 over x equals y would be inverse. Matches up to our y equals a over x. Number 5, inverse. There was a lot of inverse on this one. And lastly, number 6, neither. That addition kind of gives it away. So the big indicators that it's going to be neither is either we have addition with our variables or we only have a variable. We got to have two variables for it to be direct variation or inverse variation. Ready for the next part. Now, when we're given a table to determine direct or inverse variation, we're going to either multiply them together to determine if it's inverse or divide them to determine if it's direct. So if we look at number 7 and we do 4 times 16, well, we can grab a calculator and say 4 times 16 is 64. Then we can do 5 times 11. Well, 5 times 11 is 55. These are not the same, which means it is not going to be inverse, because if it is inverse, that value that we get from multiplying each of the pairs of x and y together should be the exact same. So now we can go on to dividing to determine if it's direct. So I can say 16 divided by 4 is 4. 11 divided by 5 is 2.2. These are not the same, so it tells me that it cannot be direct. Questions on this here? Now we could stop after the first two, because as soon as we don't get the same number, we're done. We have to get the same number for every set or every pair. So if we look at 8, well, I can just start with multiplying. It really doesn't matter which one I do first. 7 times 14 is 98. 11 times 22. Well, I know for sure this is not going to give me 98, because just 10 times 22 is 220. 242. These are not the same, so we know it's not going to be inverse. Inverse is out. So now we can move on to direct. Well, doesn't matter which one we put on top. We normally put the y's on top, because 14 divided by 7 is 2. 22 divided by 11 is 2. 28 divided by 14, 2. 34 divided by 17 is 2. 42 divided by 21 is 2. And lastly, 50 divided by 25 is 2. Since we got the same value for every single pair, we know it has to be direct. Questions on 7 or 8? Number 9. Do we want to try direct or inverse first? Direct. So we can divide these here. 29 divided by 2 is going to be 14.5. 14.5 divided by 4 is going to be 3.25 would be 6. 125. 14 divided by 14.5 divided by 4. 3.625. Did not need the 1. So direct's out. So let's go to inverse. 2 times 29 help if I got the 9 in there. Is 58. 4 times 14.5 is 8 times 7.25 is 58. Looks promising. 16 times 3.35 Thank you. 625, yes, is 58. So we can say this is inverse. Has to work for all of them. Questions on 1 through 9? We're going to look at 10 and 11 next. And when we look at simplifying each expression as far as possible, the first thing we want to do is factor the top and bottom as far as possible. We want to factor it down as far as possible and then see what we can simplify. Now, 2x squared is as simplified as it gets because it is a single term. Nothing we can do with it. 3x squared minus 4x, we do have that x squared term, so there's some factoring that we can do there. But the first thing we always want to look for is the greatest common factor. Is there a common factor between 3x squared and 4x? Well, 3 and 4, but we do have an x in common with x squared and x. And if we factor that x out of x squared, our 3x squared becomes 3x. And our 4x becomes 4. Now, the original expression, we couldn't simplify the x squared on top with the x squared on bottom because the 3x squared on bottom had the minus 4, that addition subtraction, so it stuck those two terms together. But by being able to factor that x out, I now have a product on bottom. We have that x times the 3x minus 4. And that x on bottom, with the single term on top's x, we can simplify one on top and bottom. Now, because there's only one x on bottom, outside the parentheses, it's going to simplify out completely. However, our 2x squared on top will still have the 2, but the x squared is going to become 1x because we removed 1x on top and bottom, the 1x out front and the 1x on top, giving me 2x over 3x minus 4. Questions on this here? Is there anything else in common on top and bottom? There's 2x and 3x. However, the 3x is being subtracted from 4. We're subtracting the 4 from the 3x, so that 3x minus 4 is stuck together. It's actually as simplified as it gets. If we didn't have the minus 4 on bottom, yes, the 2x and 3x would simplify further. But because of that minus 4, this is as far as we can get it. Questions on number 10 before we look at number 11? Questions on 10 before we look at 11? Number 11, again, we want to factor this as far as possible. And again, one of the things we should always be looking for is greatest common factor. If I look at the top two terms, 32x squared minus 50, is there a common factor between 32 and 50? They're both even numbers, so 2 is a divisibility or divisible by both. Now, if you're not sure if 2 is the greatest common factor, that's fine. We know it will go into both 50 and 32. So let's start there, factor it out. Because if I factor 2 out of 32, 32 divided by 2 gives me 16. Since I did not factor a variable out, there wasn't a variable in common with both, we still have the x squared. Minus 50 divided by 2 is 25. So I just started with 2 because that's one of the numbers I saw. Wasn't sure about anything else, but I factored it out. Because there's nothing that says I can't do greatest common factor. I can't factor something out again. But if we look at 16 and 25, there's not another number that goes into 16 and 25. Because our only number is divisible by 20, or 25 is divisible by, we can divide into 25 as well. 1, which doesn't help us at all. 5 and 25. 16 is not divisible by 5, and it's not divisible by 25. We can't divide those two numbers into it. So that takes care of the top for now. The denominator, 4x squared minus 17x plus 15. Is there a number or variable that goes into all three? Not a variable because 15, our third term, doesn't have a variable. And 4, the only numbers that we can divide into 4, divide 4 by, is really 2 and 4. 17 and 15 don't divide by 2 or 4. But it is factorable. 4x squared minus 17x plus 15. So we can go on and do our 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Since the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. It's negative and negative. Factors of the first term, 4x squared. Well, the x squared part would be x and x. Factors of 4, 1 and 4, or 2 and 2. Which one do we want to try first? 2 and 2. Factors of third term, factors of 15. We got 1 and 15, or 3 and 5. Which one do we want to try first? 3 and 5. Then we can check this here to make sure we got it right. 2x times negative 5 would be negative 10x. Negative 3 times 2x is negative 6x. Telling us that we have negative 16x. Now we can switch the 3 and 5, but that's not really going to change much because the 2x and 2x. I switch the 3 and 5, we're now doing 2x times negative 3 and negative 5 times 2x. The exact same product. So do we want to switch the 3 and 5 or 2 and 2 next? Doesn't really matter which at this point. Yeah, we can switch 3 and 5. 1 and 15, and we'll try again. 2x times negative 15 would be negative 30x. Negative 1 times 2x is negative 2x. Giving us negative 32x. Now, because the numbers in front of x are both the same, they're both 2 and 2, switching the 1 and 15 won't change anything. But if you're not sure, it is worth it to just go on, flip it, try it again, see if it works. Since we did both of those, I'm going to switch to 4x and x, 4 and 1. Now, 4x times negative 15 is going to be negative 60x. Negative 1 times x is negative x. Giving me negative 61x. Switch the 1 and 15, negative 4x. Negative 19x. So switching the 1 and 15 this time did change something because we had x and 4x. We had a different multiplication. All right. Well, that leaves us with 3 and 5. And we're trying to get to negative 17. Now I need to figure out where I want to put the 5 and where I want to put the 3. Now we've noticed a trend so far with our checking. Each time we checked it, the number that we got was bigger than either of our two products. Because of the same signs we're adding, we're going up. Really, we're going down because it's bigger negative. I would not want to put the 5 with the 4. Or I mean, let me rephrase that. I want to put the 5 in the same parentheses as the 4. I don't want to multiply the 5 and 4. Because 5 times 4 is what? 20. That's already bigger than the middle term, yes? So there's a good chance that's not going to work. So if we set it up here and check it, 4 times negative 3, 4x times negative 3 is negative 12x. Negative 5 times x is negative 5x. There's the middle term we want. If we had it set up the other way, 4x minus 3 times x minus 5, we would have gotten the middle term of negative 23x. A little too big. Now at this point here, does anything simplify on top and bottom? No. The numerator, 2 times 16x squared minus 25. No greatest common factor, but there is a chance it could factor because we do have x squared. Now, the main reason it wouldn't is if both terms are not perfect squares. Is there a number times itself that gives us 16? 4. And with our x, it would be 4x. Is there a number that multiplied by itself gives us 5? Or sorry, 25. 5, yeah. So what that's telling us is 16x squared minus 25 is the difference of perfect squares. 4x plus 5 times 4x minus 5. Now that does give us something in common on top and bottom. That 4x minus 5 over 4x minus 5 will simplify. Telling us that we have 2 times 4x plus 5 over x minus 3. Thank you. Questions on this here? Get ready for the next one. I'm going to go on and give you the factored form of x cubed minus 27. I did not include any of those on the test. So, not too focused on that one. Now the numerator, x squared minus 7x plus 12. There is no greatest common factor between x squared, 7x, and 12. 12 doesn't have a variable. X squared doesn't have a number in front of it. The third term is positive. If the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. So here the signs are going to be the same, and they're both going to be minus. Now we need to find the factors of the first and third term. Well, the factors of x squared are x and x. Factors of the third term, factors of 12, 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. Which one do we want? 3 and 4. Because again, we're looking for something to be in common on top and bottom. And if it is x minus 3 times x minus 4, our x minus 3's will simplify. And if I check it, x times negative 4 would be negative 4x. Negative 3 times x would be negative 3x. Negative 4x minus 3x would indeed be negative 7x, middle term we wanted. So those are the correct factors, which also means our x minus 3 over x minus 3 will simplify. Now, normally we would check the x squared plus 3x plus 9 to see if it factors because of our x squared term, possibility of it factoring. But because it came out of a difference of perfect cubes, a difference of 2 cubes, that will never factor. X squared plus 3x plus 9 is not factorable. It can be written in factored form, but those are 2 separate things. Questions on 12? We go with number 12. Yeah. Let's look at 13. X squared minus 4x minus 12 over x squared minus 4. As tempting as it is, we cannot cross out the x squared and x squared. Addition, subtraction. Which one do we want to factor first? The top or bottom? The top. First thing, again, I would look for is greatest common factor between x squared, 4x, and 12. Always look for greatest common factor first. There's not a greatest common factor between these 3 terms, so we'll look at the signs. Since the third term is negative, the signs are Opposite. Plus and minus. Factors of x squared are x and x. Factors of 12. I'm not going to rewrite them again because we already have them listed right there. 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. 2 and 6. Which one do you want? And as always, we'll check and make sure. X times negative 2, negative 2x. 6 times x is positive 6x, giving us a positive 4x. Is that the middle term we wanted? Yes and no. Yes, it's the correct number, but no, it's not the right sign. So all we need to do is flip them, and that'll tell me that I have positive 2x minus 6x, giving me the negative 4x. Okay, that is the middle term we wanted. X squared minus 4. No greatest common factor. Always be looking for that greatest common factor. It's going to make our lives easier. Since there's not one and we only have two terms being subtracted, the only real option for factoring we have is difference of perfect squares. X squared would be what? X and x. What times itself is 4? 2. So it'd be x plus 2 times x. We have x plus 2 on top and bottom, leaving us with x minus 6 over x minus 2. And that's it. That's as far as we can take it. Questions on this here? We're ready for the next one. Perform the given operation with monomials. If we don't have any addition or subtraction like number 14, multiply like terms on top and bottom, then simplify. 15, since we do have those addition, subtraction, we have those polynomials, factor first, then multiply. Yes. So if we look at 14, on top we're going to multiply it. Well, before, there is no other number on top to multiply with 4, so it's just going to be 4. X has no other like terms that we're multiplying on top, so it's just x. Now, y's, we have y to the third times y. When we multiply like bases, we add the exponents. So 3 plus 1 gives us 4. On bottom, the only number on bottom that's being multiplied by anything else is just 8. So the 8 stays. X's, on the other hand, we have x squared and x. X squared times x. 2 plus 1 is 3, telling us that it's x to the third. Y is the only term we have on bottom, so it would just be y. Any questions on how we got to 4xy to the fourth over 8x cubed y? Now we do have some common terms on top and bottom. 4 over 8 is going to reduce to what? Well, we're not sure. Since it's just numbers, we can't type the whole thing in. So 4 over 8 reduces to 1 over 2. I don't write the 1 in just in case anything's left on top, because I don't necessarily have to write 1 times x or 1 times y. We understand that that's there. Next thing we can look at is our x over x to the third. When we divide like bases, we subtract the exponents. The exponent on top is 1. Exponent on bottom is 3. So I look at it as 3 minus 1, which is 2. Bigger on top or bigger on bottom? Bottom. So the x squared goes on bottom. Because really all we're doing is removing 1x from the top and bottom. The x's on top are gone. I still have 2 left on bottom. Last thing we have is y. So we have y to the fourth over y, which would be 4 minus 1. 4 minus 1 is 3. Bigger on top or bottom? Top. Tell me that I have y to the third over 2x squared. Now, if it had worked out that all of our terms that we had left were all left on bottom, I have to go back in and put a 1 on top. If all the terms on bottom simplified out, we do not have to write a 1 on bottom. We only have to write it if it's on top. Questions on 14, how we got to y cubed over 2x squared. With multiplying two rational expressions, especially if we have these addition subtraction, the first thing we want to do is factor it as far as possible. We could multiply through, but then we'd have to factor bigger expressions. It's nicer to go on and factor it here. I'm going to start with the two denominators. 2x, single term, single expression. Doesn't factor, doesn't simplify farther than where that's at. X minus 1, no greatest common factor between x and 1. Degree is 1. That's as simplified as it gets. Do we want to look at x squared minus 4x first, or x squared plus 3x minus 4? X squared minus 4x. Now, we don't have three terms, so most likely we're going to have to do difference of perfect squares. But let's look for greatest common factor first. Is there a greatest common factor between x squared and 4x? X. Because if I factor x out of x squared, we get x. If we factor x out of 4x, we get 4. Both of them have an x, so we factor it out and get x times x minus 4. Inside the parentheses, is there any other greatest common factor? No, because 4 doesn't have a variable anymore. X doesn't have a number. And the degree is now 1. We are done. The only thing it had was a greatest common factor. Our last expression, x squared plus 3x minus 4. There is no greatest common factor amongst those three terms. And we do still have that quadratic, so there's a good chance we're going to have two sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Now, since the third term is negative, if the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. Now we need to find the factors of the first and third term. Well, the factors of x squared are x and x. Now our factors of 4, 1 and 4, or 2 and 2. Which one do we want to try first? 1 and 4 or 2 and 2? 1 and 4. Now, the reason I say 1 and 4 is because what we're looking for is something to simplify on top and bottom, yes? If we look at the denominators, the two that we have are 2x and x minus 1, yes? So if I want something to simplify, I either need x or 2 outside parentheses, and what's inside parentheses need to match up with our x minus 1. So if I did choose 2 and 2, I don't have an x minus 2 on bottom. I don't have something to simplify it with. Doesn't mean this won't work. It just doesn't help us with simplifying or reducing. I'm hoping something does reduce. So if I want something to reduce, it'd be nice if one of these sets of parentheses is x minus 1, because once we multiply, we'd have 1 on top and bottom, which would mean the other would have to be x plus 4. Now we can check this to make sure. X times negative 1 is negative x. Positive 4 times x would be positive 4x. Telling us if this is the correct setup, the middle term should be positive 3x. Is it positive 3x? Yes. So those are indeed the correct factors. So we can use the other terms to help us factor it and see what we have. Now we multiply this out on top. I like to move those monomial terms, those terms we factored out, single terms, to the front, just so we keep track of them. So we'd have x times x minus 4 times x plus 4 times x minus 1. On bottom, we have 2x times x minus 1. We have product of terms on top, product of terms on bottom. So we can start simplifying. The x minus 1 and x minus 1 would cancel. Anything else? The x, because the x on top is being multiplied, so we can, and the x on bottom is also being multiplied with the 2. Because there's a product on top, product on bottom with that x outside, they simplify out. If it had been 2 plus x on bottom, this would not work. And what that leaves us with is x minus 4 times x plus 4 all over 2. Questions on this here? Yes. Are you ready for the next one? X squared plus 3x minus 4 over x squared plus 4x plus 4 times 2x squared plus 4x over x squared minus 4x plus 3. We want to factor these as far as possible, then multiply, then simplify. Now, it really doesn't matter where we start. I'm going to start with the 2x squared plus 4x. The reason I'm starting there is there's 2 terms, so there's the number of ways, number of factors that we can have is kind of smaller. Greatest common factor between 2x squared and 4x. 2 and x. Because 2 and 4 are both divisible by 2. They both have an x in common, so we can factor 2x out. 2x factored out of 2x squared. The 2 will simplify out completely. The x is going to be reduced from squared to just 1. Plus 4x. When we factor 2x out, the 4 divided by 2 is 2. The x factors out completely, telling me that I have 2x times x plus 2. Questions on this here? Now, it is giving me hints already, because if something's going to reduce, I hope I see at least x plus 2 show up in one of the denominators, because that'd be nice. That means it could simplify. Well, let's look at the first denominator, x squared plus 4x plus 4. X squared, 4x, and 4 does not have a greatest common factor. There's not a number or variable that goes into all 3. Since the third term is positive, our signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. So we have plus and plus. Factors of x squared are x and x. Now, factors of 4, 1 and 4, or 2 and 2. Which one do we want to try first? 2 and 2. Because if this does work, hey, I do have an x plus 2 on top and bottom. And if I check this off to the side, we'd get positive 2x plus 2x is equal to positive 4x. That is the middle term we wanted, so these are indeed the correct factors. Two more to factor, numerator, denominator, top or bottom. Where do we want to go next? Top. X squared plus 3x minus 4. Again, no greatest common factor to factor out. 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Since the third term is negative, our signs are going to be opposite. One's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. Now, it really doesn't matter which one's positive, which one's negative. We just got to set one as positive, one as negative. Factors of x squared are x and x. Now, again, they gave us 4, so 1 and 4 or 2 and 2. Which one do we want this time? 1 and 4. Take it again. X times negative 4 would be negative 4x. 1 times x would be positive 1x. Negative 4x plus x, negative 4 plus 1 would be negative 3. So that is the correct number, but wrong sign. So we need to switch the signs, which will now give us positive 4x, negative x, giving us the positive 3x that we wanted. Now we'll move on to our last set of factors. X squared minus 4x plus 3. Again, no greatest common factor. If there was, we'd factor it out and then factor it further if possible. Since the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. Negative, negative. Factors of x squared are x and x, and the only factors of 3 are 1 and 3. Negative 3x minus x does indeed give us negative 4x. That is the middle term we wanted, getting us to this point here. Questions on how we got here? We'll multiply everything together. I'm going to move the 2x to the front, giving us 2x times x minus 1 times x plus 4 times x plus 2. On bottom, we have x plus 2 times x plus 2 times x minus 1 times x minus 3. And we do have a few things that are going to simplify. The x minus 1 and x minus 1, x plus 2 and x plus 2. And what that leaves us with is 2x times x plus 4 over x plus 2 times x minus 3. All right, we'll keep going with this on Monday. We'll finish it up then. Test part 1 is on Tuesday, part 2 is on Wednesday.